Hi, I'm Tina Simmons. I'm a board member of the Coalition to Protect Maryland Burial Sites, and I'm a board member of the Anne Arundel Genealogical Society. I've been working with the Genealogical Society for over 25 years, researching cemeteries and their occupants for the society. In addition to transcribing the information on the tombstones, I've been using other sources to find out who's buried in the various sites, such as death certificates, funeral home records, obituaries, and funeral programs. This gives us a more complete idea of who's buried there, even without monuments. I'm presenting information about institutional cemeteries in Anne Arundel County. They cover a variety of areas, mental hospitals, prisons, county almshouses, and other institutions for feeble-minded individuals. Hi, I'm Tina Simmons. I've been a member of the Anne Arundel Genealogical Society for about 30 years, and I started researching cemeteries for them. Initially, I was working with tombstone inscriptions, and in doing so, I realized that there were a lot of people buried in those cemeteries that didn't necessarily have headstones. In order to try to find information on those people, I've worked with a lot of additional records. I've worked with cemetery inscriptions, I've worked with funeral home records, I've worked with death certificates, and I've worked with obituaries in the newspapers, and funeral programs. Funeral programs are more likely to be found in the African American community. I'm starting with some of the memorials to individuals that are buried in state-run hospitals in Maryland. This is the Rosewood Center, and it says, "In loving memory of our Rosewood friends," presented by the Women's Auxiliary. Okay. This is the Sunnyside Memorial at Springfield State Hospital in Sykesville. This actually lists the names, no dates, but it does list the names of those known to be buried there. The Anatomy Board of Maryland. People don't necessarily think of that when they think of lost or forgotten tombstones, but they held a memorial once a year. They bury the cremains from people who have donated their bodies to medical science, and this is also housed on the Springfield Hospital Cemetery grounds. Carroll County, a potter's field. This site was the cemetery for the almshouse, now the Farm Museum, which served as the county home for the poor, unabled, and unwanted. This is a photograph of the only known tombstones that existed in the 1950s at the Quarantine Hospital in Curtis Bay, Hawkins Point in Curtis Bay. This is in the northern part of Anne Arundel County. Baltimore had 2 quarantine hospitals. Some served the citizens of Baltimore City, some served the immigrants and the seamen who came in through the port of Baltimore. This was a huge cemetery. It operated from 1882 to 1960, and I have death certificates that I have found for people from 1900 through 1934. I assume that most of the death certificates are going to be for Baltimore City. I haven't researched that many Baltimore City records. Have concentrated on Anne Arundel County. DC Children's Center. This place was located, give or take, where NSA is now, in Anne Arundel County. It has been known as Cedar Knolls and the National Junior Republic. It was the home for Washington, D.C.'s juvenile delinquent boys from 1954 to 1992. Although it was formerly located on the west side of the Baltimore-Washington Parkway, it was moved to the east side, probably around 1950s. I have conflicting information from death certificates. Some say the person died at the Children's Center and were buried at the district training school. Others say exactly the opposite. I have this photograph of the memorial. I don't know where it's located. I don't know if it still exists or not. This is the district training school monument in Laurel, Maryland. This was also a Washington, D.C. facility for the developmentally disabled or feeble-minded. A lot of them came almost at the time of birth. They were institutionalized because their families were told to put them in a home and forget about them. On this monument are 388 names. You can't really tell by looking at them, but they're also listed by rows. This is a large field behind that monument. You can plainly see where some of the graves have been. There are depressions. We discovered that under the topsoil, there are brass markers that indicate the name, the race, the sex, the birth, and the death date. This is more than we had on a lot of them. We've found 112 of these plaques so far, and so far I've found 78 death certificates. Because of the crossover with the DC Children's Center, I don't know how many are buried here and how many could have been buried there. This is St. Anne's Cemetery in Annapolis. This is a monument for those who were moved from Church Circle, which is the traffic circle where the church is in downtown Annapolis, to the cemetery itself, several blocks away. Crownsville State Hospital. This is the marker that Dennis showed you earlier. A copy of one of the numbered stones. This is the Maryland House of Corrections in Jessup, Maryland. There's a large whitewashed monument that says, "Judge each man by what he might have been." And then this is a plaque on that monument. Here lie the final unclaimed remains of 182 former inmates that expired prior to 1951. Now, that's saying 182. I found death certificates, and I have several years before 1981 that I haven't even attempted to look at yet. I have 183 death certificates so far. At one point, there were small white wooden crosses that marked the monuments. In the 1950s or so, it was thought that the graves were removed. No one knows where. Don't know what's happened to them. Londontown Almshouse. This was the county almshouse known as the county home. It's located in Edgewater, Maryland. You can go visit it. They operated from 1850 to 1962 as an almshouse. And there were thought to have been 1 to 3 burials a month. So we're talking over 1,300 burials. I have records on 80 death certificates. 33 were white men, 3 were white women, 23 were black men, and 9 were black women. There's no plaque. This is where they're thought to have been buried. This is a garden area. There are a lot of weddings that are held in this area. and there are no marks, there are no preservation memorials to these people. And that's what I have for you.
Thank you.